Coming front court, across the timeline with 10, knocked away, Dudley Bradley for the stop, 70-68, 3, 2, 1, Matthews off balance, off the glass, Dudley Bradley's defense did it! And ready on his second attempt. That one is no good, they battle for it, loose ball, recovered Marvin, he scores! Pushes into Hubert Davis. 8 seconds. Davis trying to get free. Over to Fox. Fox, baseline. Up for the shot. Good! Off the glass! Oklahoma calls timeout, but the game is over! The game is over! Carolina has upset number 1 Oklahoma!
Turns it over. Kenny Williams with the steal. Gets it to Barry. 17 seconds to go. Barry, Duke not fouling. Gets it to Johnson. To Pinson for the highlight. Inbounds goes deep on the right sideline to May. Holy smokes, a long three! Are you kidding me? Holy cow! Pinson gets all the way to the rim, and what a way to pick up his first field goal of the season by throwing down the tomahawk.
With 20 seconds left to play, goes back to Michael Jordan, jumper from out on the left, good! 63-62, 13, 12, 11, Georgetown with one timeout. Fred Brown looking, way to Worthy! 35! The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship!
Rebounded by Weber. Michigan out of timeout. Weber front court, Carolina with foul. He takes the timeout, they're out of timeout. Technical foul! Technical foul! Brown gets it into Williams. Here comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out to head. Long outside shot. Short rebounded. May! It's over! Carolina has won the national championship! How about them Tar Heels? They are the national champions.
That's it! Make room for 2017. The Tar Heels are the national daggum champions.
This is the Roy's Boys podcast with your host, Joshua Marlowe. Hey everybody, welcome you to an edition of the Roy's Boys podcast powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony, we are back to discuss Friday night 78-62 win over UNC-Wilmington. And Anthony, this was a pretty important game for Carolina in a lot of reasons. First time on the road for this year's team. They had to find a way to get over the emotional victory Wednesday night. Kind of weird we're saying it's emotional victory with it being the first game of the year, but it was very emotional for this year's team with how young they are, the amount of injuries. And look, they started out relatively slow. We expected that. Wilmington came out and fired up as just the biggest home game probably in the history of that program. But once Carolina settled in, their talent and size took over and led them on the way to a relatively easy win Friday night.
Yeah, I think, Roy's one of those guys that really loves to use, the term, talent kind of wins out, in these types of games where you're the more talented team, and even if you don't play your A game, you're going to find a way to win. And that was pretty much what happened in this game against UNC-Wilmington. I mean, I admit, like you said, and I think a lot of people, from the national perspective are trying to downplay it a little bit. This is a good thing for this team to go on the road and win a game like this. I mean, granted, UNC-Wilmington is probably not a tournament team, just based on what we saw the other night. But, at the same time, this is a true road game. It's in an environment with a team that was pumped up to play their biggest game of the entire season. And, I think ultimately when you look back on it, this will be one of those ones that you'll look and say, okay, this is the game that probably helps Carolina grow a little bit. I don't think it's going to be one that you're going to look back and say, no, that was one of the tougher games of the season. But it's definitely one that shouldn't be downplayed. Carolina with a good win. But there was definitely some things that they left out there on the court that I know you're going to want to get into.
Yeah, this game really gets them prepared for that December trip to Charlottesville. I know it's going to be a different atmosphere when they go to Virginia, but just think about it. If they haven't played this game, that would have been their first true road game. And we all know the horrors that this program has had in UVA the last couple of years. This kind of gets them ready. It's a test, see where they're at. And look, I thought for the most part they handled it very well. I thought they responded very well to the absence of Armando Bacot, who left early in the game with what they were describing as a concussion-type injury with a hit to the head. And look, the guys that Carolina needs to be good night in, night out, you got that in your starters. Cole Anthony and Garrison Brooks gave you double-doubles, but you got something from the bench in Justin Pierce who gave you 18 and 12, and this is a guy that looked out of sorts Wednesday night against Notre Dame. We thought coming back into a CAA arena he would be a little bit more comfortable, a little more relaxed, and be the kind of player we thought he could be. And that's what he was. He gave you 18 points, hit 4 triples, gave you 12 rebounds, and it really gave Carolina something to whenever Cole Anthony or Garrison Brooks got the limited amount of rest, he was able to produce and pick up the slack.
Yeah, I think that it was definitely nice for him to be able to go back into a place that he was comfortable with, and you could see that really early on with some of the confidence that he had in shooting the basketball. I mean, you can't really say, enough about how big he was the other night because not only, I mean, look, double-double in the first half was fantastic, but also the amount of minutes that he had to play after coming in and, in that first game, kind of learning that his role was really mainly to come off the bench, just give them a little bit of a different look, at the 4 position, a little bit smaller, can stretch the floor a little bit more than Garrison Brooks to be able to do out of the 4. And all of a sudden, when Armando Bacot goes down and doesn't come back onto the floor, Justin Pierce realized, okay, I'm pretty much what they've got the rest of the way. And I thought, overall, he played very well. Probably my player of the game, if I'm being really honest. I mean, 7 of 12 from the field, 4 of 7 from 3. And the good thing from that is that, we've kind of asked somebody to be that three-point shooter. I think just from the first couple of games, because he did hit one against Notre Dame and did take a couple other ones that, he looked confident in but just didn't go down. He looks like he's going to be that guy that's going to be able to come in and knock down those outside shots when you need him to. And the other thing I liked about it, not only you mentioned the 12 rebounds, but look, 6 of them were defensive, 6 of them were offensive. So he was hitting the offensive glass as hard as anybody that we've seen so far this year. Man, you really got to hand it to him. I thought it was just a phenomenal overall performance by him. And yeah, out of the 2 transfers so far, I think he's definitely showing that, early on, he's been the better of the 2.
Yeah, we'll move on from the discussion of Pierce, and we got to talk about Cole Anthony, which is going to become a reoccurring theme on this podcast. Gave Carolina 20 points, 10 rebounds, so back-to-back double-doubles. His offense wasn't as efficient as it was in the opener, only 7 of 24 from the field, 4-11 from 3, and then he even struggled from the foul line, going 2 of 7. So a lot of this was probably nerves, his first game on the road. But this is something that the production is great, 20 points, but 7 of 24 from the field is not going to cut it in the ACC. It's not going to cut it when you get into the battle for Atlantis. And 2 of 7 from the foul from your point guard. You need better production from him when he gets to the charity stripe. But I mean, he was plus 24 when he was on the floor. And I guess the thing that is still just surprising is he looks in so control of his game. He hasn't, he's going to have freshman moments for 2 games we haven't seen it, but he just commands the floor with a presence as a freshman that we haven't seen probably since Kendall Marshall when he was running the point guard the second half of that 2011 season.
Yeah, I mean, the confidence that he has is really amazing. And, I know that he struggled a little bit shooting from the field. I think, look, this is going to kind of be what he is. He's going to be a guy that's going to take a lot of shots, and sometimes he's going to knock down a ton of them. Sometimes he's going to score in mid to high 30s, low 40s maybe even. But I think he knows that part of the reason why he has to do that is, there's not really another guy on this team that you can feel overly confident in on the offensive end. Look, I love what we've seen so far this season from Garrison Brooks, but that's mostly been on the defensive end. We haven't seen him perform all that well on the offensive end. And, Justin Pierce had a good night the other night, but is he a guy that you can really rely on, this early in the season, especially after what you saw in that first game? Maybe you didn't feel like you were confident enough to put it in his hands or let him shoot it 17, 18 times. And that's understandable. So I feel like there were some people that might be getting a little concerned about the volume of shots that we're seeing early on from Cole Anthony, but I think that's also just kind of how he plays. Here's the thing about it. I mean, look, he had 20 and 10. He's just the fourth Division I freshman ever to start his career with back-to-back 20 and 10 games to start his career. I mean, that's ridiculous. So, I mean, this guy's a special talent. And the other thing that I looked at, we talked about it the other night. I don't remember the number from him the other night. He was plus 24 when he was on the court. So, I mean, let's be real honest. This kid's doing everything that he needs to. Yeah, you'd like to see him maybe be a little bit more efficient, but still, it's early on, and I'm not really overly concerned about the amount of shots that he's taken. It still looks like he's a really, really good player. Now, the free throw shooting thing, yeah, that's something that you'd like to see get corrected, but I'm not overly concerned about that right now. It's just it's something special that we're witnessing. This kid's going to be an exciting player the whole year. I think he's going to be one of those guys that when we look back and have to discuss the greatest point guards in Tar Heel history, he's definitely going to be one of those guys that's going to have a really good argument just based on the first two games.
Yeah, statistically, it's no surprise Carolina dominated certain areas because, of course, they got the win. They outshot UNC-W 47-35. The rebounding margin was a lot tighter than I thought it was going to be, 54-48. I think the rebounding numbers for Wilmington just kind of sees how much C.B. McGrath, we all know his relationship with Roy Williams, how much his program is valuing rebounding the ball. They were able to keep it that even with Carolina. You got to think Carolina rebounded Notre Dame by 20 Wednesday night, only out-rebounded UNC-W by 6. But I think the biggest stat of the game that was, that I looked at post-game was Carolina turned the ball over 8 times, and they turned it over plenty in the opener, and they forced 17, so they were plus 9, I guess, in the turnover battle. And that's a good sign to see that you could see they looked at the film from Wednesday, they corrected it by Friday, and their first time on the road, they seemed to be a lot more comfortable handling the basketball.
Yeah, I think just even looking at certain guys that took care of the basketball a little bit better. Cole Anthony turned it over 4 times in the game against Notre Dame, turned it over just 2 the other night. Christian Keeling, who turned it over 5 times in the game against Notre Dame, he turned it over just once. So you can see that, there was a focus to cut down on the mistakes. Now, the other thing is that, look, we talked about it in the recap podcast. Notre Dame really thrives on turning you over, and they're very successful at doing it. That's one of the things that Mike Bray really focuses on with his team because he knows that the way he recruits, he just doesn't bring in these offensive superstars. So I wasn't overly concerned with it. Also, with the fact of it being an opener, you're going to see some sloppiness. But I think, to see Carolina clean it up and hold on to the basketball was really, and when you look at the final score, was pretty key because there were a lot of turnovers. This game probably would have been a lot closer than people would have originally thought. So, that was something good to see on the offensive end. With the rebounding margin, I'm not going to say I'm not concerned at all, but the thing is, you look at the differences in the game. Carolina in the game against Notre Dame shot 46.7% from the field. In the game against UNC-W the other night, they shot 37.5%. There was a lot more chances at rebounds. Carolina wasn't able to get on the offensive glass as well as they've been able to do in the past few years. But the other thing is remember, they didn't have Armando Bacot. And look, some people might be saying, well, how big of an influence is that? He was okay against Notre Dame, and then we only saw him for 3 minutes in the game against UNC-W, so we don't know if he's really that important. He's 7 foot. When you have to then bring in Justin Pierce, who is 6'7", maybe 6'8" at the max, that's a huge drop-off in size. So I understand why some people might be saying, okay, against a team in UNC-W that struggled to out-rebound Johnson of Wales, that's not really something. That's something that we should maybe read into. I wouldn't read into it too much, especially if they get Bacot back. But Bacot's injury, I think, is going to be talked. It needs to be talked about a little bit more than it's being talked about right now. I feel like a lot of people are just kind of casting it off. But that's the reason I thought the other night they struggled on the glass against UNC-W was just because simply they weren't as big once Bacot left the floor.
Yeah. When you lose Bacot and you're already as thin as you are in the post, it's gonna affect this team in the short term. and it could affect this team in the long term depending